classic whodunits to modern psychological thrillers, each episode offers exclusive insights, behind-the-scenes stories, and discussions on the art of crafting compelling crime narratives. Whether you're a seasoned investigator or a newcomer to the genre, Books to Die For is your ultimate guide to the thrilling world of crime literature.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. We got Peaches in the House of Mystery.
So, Al, thank you for having me co-host today. I was thinking about our last time that we were hosting together when you called me Mr. Peaches, and now my husband calls me Mr. Peaches because he listened to the interview, and he's like, "Hey, Mr. Peaches." And I'm like, "That's going to be the name of my demon in a book. Don't call me Mr. Peaches."
Yeah, you see, you get good ideas from talking to people, right? That was Golden that said that, right?
It was, Peaches. And I immediately wrote it in my notes app. I'm like, yes, Mr. Peaches.
That's a really good one. That can go places. I can't wait for the movie.
Who knows? Mr. Peaches might have a whole series.
Well, yeah, why not? Netflix. Let's do it. Well, anyway, so now we've got a really great writer here. Real fortunate to have him, and I'm glad we do. A new book called Blackbird, and it's part of a Nik Byron investigation. Mark Pawlosky, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Mark, so what would make a totally rational, sane person get into the writing world?
Well, I started at an early age and wasn't really thinking about it. I went into journalism. I first was, when I went to college, was a acting drama major and switched into journalism when I walked into the student newspaper office one day and saw all the fun they were having, and decided to immediately switch careers. And that's how it kind of started. And I went from that to newspaper work. Then, like a lot of people, migrated to the internet and digital media. And I've been at it ever since.
Well, when you write a book like this, and this part of this series and stuff, what are you thinking about when you write this? Like, what draws you to doing a mystery investigation sort of thing like this, in this kind of story?
I think the characters, one, and I've always had, probably like a lot of people, little plots running in the back of my mind about things. And, being a reporter, I did either cover or be exposed to, both as a reporter and an editor, a number of scams and conspiracies. And so that just kind of weaves its way into my thought process as I'm sitting down to write, and I'm trying to think of something that would be suspenseful, and putting characters in positions that they've got to figure how to get them out of it after they've got themselves into deep trouble.
So, Mark, I almost squawked when you were just talking about yourself when you said that you were a drama theater person and then a journalist, because I was a drama theater person, then a journalist, and then back to a drama theater person. I know, when I'm developing a character, a lot of my, former drama background kind of takes over with my character development. Did your background in drama and theater help you create your characters, especially your central character, Nick?
I haven't said this too much, but a number of people who have read the series and the first two books, Hack and Friendly Fire, describe them as very visual and cinematic. And so subconsciously, I think that is true. I mean, I even more consciously probably. I do think in terms of how this looks on the page and how this looks in someone's head, and kind of playing out scenes. And I think that my books are heavily dialogue driven. I certainly hope they are, at least. I really spend a lot of time polishing the dialogue, and I think that would be true in film and certainly on stage. That that dialogue carries a lot of the conflicts. I've taken even recently some writing workshops where dialogue is not that forefront of the story, and I always find those stories well told. Perhaps I find them missing something. So in that sense, yes, I think that I think about the characters and how they're interacting in that moment, and how they appear to me. both physically and emotionally, and what how they're expressing themselves.
Do you play every role in your head as if you if I was starring in this movie?
Not necessarily, but I do have friends who do that, and there is work being done on putting together a pitch for the series for film. So I'll just leave it there. So that.
Well, you don't dress up. I dress up like my characters. I mean,
Al, you write about serial killers.
and I mean, it's important to get into the character. I got to be real.
I mean, I won't lie. I've done it. I'm I'll just dress up like my ghost.
Well, there we go. Now
hair,
we're hearing
dress.
it now.
Yeah.
I get it now. How do you make a character like Nick Byron? How do you make this character so that it's one that people want to follow? They want to know what goes on. I mean, because character's really the key, isn't it? Right? Because readers want to go back and find out what's Nick going to do now and what happens now. Right? That's kind of how it goes. So. What's your process? So,
having been a reporter, having known a lot of reporters, I have honestly drawn from my experience. And Nick is sort of an homage to a reporter who worked for me. His name was Chris Byron, and he wrote a column for years at the New York Observer called Through the Keyhole. And Chris was just a wonderful investigative reporter. And if your day started out, if you were on Wall Street and your day started out with a call from Chris Byron, you were going to have a miserable day. I could guarantee you. That hit, so knowing that in the back of my mind and knowing how I was as a reporter and other reporters I've known, I just, I pluck certain things and, build the characters around, not necessarily exact matches to humans I've known, people I've known, but pieces of them that I've known. And then once I do that, I let my imagination then take over and fill in the blanks and kind of paint around them, get everything in that needs to make them more human. People So who have you killed off?
And I was just about to say, who have you cast as the villain?
Yeah, we want to.
These are important questions.
So in the opening of Hack, there are these two guys in this van driving away from this explosion that they has set off, a sabotage in Washington, D.C. I covered the Oklahoma City bombing when I was a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. I was working out of the Dallas Bureau and was one of the first reporters on the scene in Oklahoma City because Dallas was, right out of left field. It was a 30-minute flight. As it so happens that McVeigh and Nichols, the two perpetrators in that, were from this little rural area in northern Michigan, where I happened to grow up. My professional life and my background all sort of intersected at that one point. While I was covering this story, I always thought and wondered what these guys talked about as they were driving from Kansas after they rented that Ryder truck and drove it to Oklahoma City, and what were the conversations that they were having afterwards and what was going through their minds. And so the two characters that you're introduced to, Cooley and Nukowski, in the first chapter of Hack, are lifted, at least to some degree, from Nichols and McVeigh and my image of what they were contemplating and how they contemplated and what they did.
Are you hearing your characters?
I do.
Do you see them?
I do.
Yeah, you do.
I do. I say that in regards to I read out loud to myself almost every line. Not almost every line of dialogue, and even the exposition. So if anything sounds inauthentic to my ear, it goes immediately. How these characters I would think that they would speak and how they would carry themselves and how they would interact with others.
So you see them, you hear them. Do they ever do things that you as the writer think to yourself, oh, that's the wrong choice, but you let them make that choice anyways?
Nick does a lot of dumbass things, both personally and professionally. Certainly personally, and And I've made a few of those choices myself, and have regretted them. But he ends up getting himself into predicaments and situations that, on reflection, he otherwise would rather not have. I would imagine.
So, like when you're driving, do you hear these voices and they tell you?
No, when I used to run, I definitely. I don't know if they told me, but their dialogue would spring to my mind and inside my head about how they would, in a scene that I was creating, how they would interact with one another. But no, they don't. They don't tell me to go rob a bank or something like that, and then I listen to them.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And you wouldn't listen to them even if they told you that, correct?
Right. No. And if they started talking to me in that sort of direct way, every day I might pray for a moment.
Seek help.
So let's talk about the premise of the book. What is a Nick Byron investigation? Like this is book 3, right? So what's the premise of the series?
All 3 of them start out with pretty much a dramatic first chapter. Then we find Nick shortly thereafter, either in the generally in the throes of some self-reflection, regret, things that are not going right in his life, and these stories are these events sort of materialize in front of him. And Nick is a reporter for Newshound. He started out as the chief editor in Washington, D.C. Even before day 1 of his new job, he's demoted. Nick is back in the reporting ranks. And the premise is that, Nick is sort of swimming against the tide, against what's happening in media generally and what's happening in his newsroom specifically, and certainly being stonewalled by various government officials and administrations as he tries to unravel these mysteries that have occurred. One in Hack is a bombing of this high-tech office park where a lot of surveillance, U.S. top classified information is being conducted on cyber issues. The next is in friendly fire, the murder of one of the richest men in the United States, who is also the founder of this AI company, murdered by his young trophy wife. And the third is in Blackbird is this outbreak of a virus after the pandemic. Sort of Nick following the leads and following the facts where they may take him on these journeys. And he's surrounded by a group of like-minded reporters that had followed him from the Midwest to Washington, D.C., Mia Landry, Patrick Morgan, and Frank Rath, who is like the dean of the newsroom. And so the stories unfold along those plot lines, but within those plot lines are, the personal relationship that Nick has with these folks, as well as with his love interest, Samantha White, and his ex-wife, who also is a U.S. attorney and happened to be transferred to Washington, D.C. about the same time Nick did.
So how much of the story do you know before you sit down to actually start? Has it been outlined out? Are you a flashlight discovery author? What's going on? Do you know the end of the mystery, or are you figuring it out?
The exact ending, not precisely. Newshound was the first one, which has not been published yet. It's going to be a prequel to the whole series. And I outlined that extensively. The next book, Hack, I outlined extensively. The third one, Friendly Fire, less so, but in more in broad strokes, because I already knew the characters, right? I didn't have to sort of create them on the page in the outline. The book I'm working on now is called Rendezvous, and I joined this writers group that George Saunders out of Syracuse does online. Saunders, who is a fairly known literary writer, had really recommended and pushed that, don't outline. Just let your imagination take you where it will. And so that's what I've been doing with Rendezvous. I have to say, it's like the worst piece of advice I ever got.
I was just about to ask, I'm like, are you drinking more? Are you crying more?
I am walking around the house with vacant eyes and, around the neighborhood, trying to come up with, okay, what have I got myself into? And
what I love about that is I've always been a George Saunders fan, and I've always been I'm not going to outline, I'm just going to figure it out. And now my agent is like, I need an outline for your next project. And I'm like, I don't even know how to do an outline. I don't know the end. I don't even know what's going to happen in the next chapter. So it's always fun to talk to writers who are trying something new and changing the process mid.
I would probably never forgive George for that, honestly.
It's been a real adventure. And some of it, I guess it's made me a better writer, because in not knowing where I'm going, I'm writing stuff that is just, kind of appearing out of nowhere. And then I have had to go back and just be ruthless about cutting it out because it didn't seem genuine. What I'm winding up with, I really like. It's just been torturous to get to this point, honestly.
The writing of the evil character or the bad person, is it the same process for you? Do you do it differently?
In each of the novels, I think what are really great female characters. Also, in two of the novels, the assassins or the killers are women. So it's really fun to write those characters because they just, I don't know if I apply a different lens to them, but they come on in a way that people don't immediately suspect them of being. They're going to be the trigger man, so to speak, or trigger woman, and figuring out how they might act in that moment, or how they would approach a moment in a scene. I find it both challenging and really fulfilling when I think I do it right.
Do you have a character that you've developed that ended up being a really hard character to write? Does one stick out in your memory of just you thinking, oh, why did I invent this character when I'm not sure I can do them?
But those characters generally have a short shelf life in my books. So the one is in Friendly Fire, the guy named Jeff Tate, who is the owner of this AI company called Yukon, which is the largest AI company in the world. I didn't have to wrestle with him too much once I sort of built him up, because he gets killed in the first chapter. And I didn't know that when I started writing the book, but once I outlined who he was going to be or what he was, I realized that it became almost a caricature of a character. And I didn't want that. I didn't know how I would carry him forward and how he would speak. And, he's eliminated immediately, which allows me to just go back and describe him to people, because I don't have to put him in dialogue since he's already dead. And I think that was the hardest part for me to think about in him, is how that person, one of the richest people in the world, founder and owner of the largest AI company, how he conduct himself in person, and how he would interact with people in speaking to them. So I kind of removed that problem for myself subconsciously, I guess, by getting rid of him right off the bat.
Do you put setting as important in your books? So it's like a character almost?
Washington, D.C. is where the first, these three published novels, the setting for each one of those. Though I ranged pretty far in the opening of Blackbird, the setting is immediately in the North Cascade Mountains in a little town called Twisp in the Mettal Valley. And it's an idyllic, beautiful spot on Earth. I mean, it looks like you're in Switzerland when you're there. In Friendly Fire, I go down to the Keys in Florida, to Ted Williams' home in one of the Keys. So, and then I'm out on the Maryland eastern seaboard in Hack. In Blackbird, Puck Hall is soloing the Appalachian Trail. Though I've never soloed the Appalachian Trail, I hiked parts of the Pacific Coast Trail. So I kind of got a sense of what that's like and tried to recreate that. But yeah, so I do like settings. I really particularly like natural settings, backcountry settings and outdoor settings.
It's really good tax write-off.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did you ever just say, oh, I'm going to set this in northern Italy? Yes, I have to go and do some research there.
Malta was, I think it appears in one of my novels, and I did spend some time in Malta. So yes, I have taken that route, yes.
How convenient is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it seems like you really kind of live through your characters during the time that you're writing. Like you're going through what they're going through in a sense. Do you think it changes you each time you write a book?
I think it allows me to really have, this is a sort of strange, but a very fun life outside of life. So I get to live with him for a while, right? And I get to live with that story outside of reality, in the physical world. When I'm writing, yes, I would say it changes me, and I become part of their world that I help shape. But then I have to step back into the physical world. So I don't find myself split between two worlds. I'm not schizophrenic in that way.
Yeah, we're going to say you hear voices while you drive, and you have split personality.
Yeah. Right. We've implied that they told him to rob a bank. Is Nick as a character, is he still surprising you? I mean, you're 5 books in. Like, there's 3 that are out. There's a prequel. Are you still discovering him, and how do you do that? I feel like at 5 books you must go into it thinking you know him, but...
Yeah, I think I know Nick pretty well by now. Along the way, Nick has grown. He started out in the first book, Newshound, the prequel. He was just going through a divorce at that point. Now in Blackbird, he has a child and is coping with that, looking at getting wed. He has taken on other responsibilities, though he still can be very reckless in his life, especially in his reporting life and some of in his personal life. Reality kind of hits him up alongside the head, and he gets these setbacks. I do ask myself, where does Nick end up in all this? When the final chapter is written, and I don't know that Nick yet. I'm not quite sure of that. At the end of Friendly Fire, Nick leaves Newshound to write his own book. In the beginning of Blackbird, that's where we find him. His book is published. He has gotten good reviews, but his sales have been anemic, to say the least. And he's kind of at a loss of what he's going to do with his life at this point. He's no longer in the news business. His publisher and agent are pushing him to write another book. Even though his first book has not been very successful, he's in a funk, in a quandary.
Oh, no, I feel like I'm Nick. We're all Nick, aren't we?
So what inspires you? Other writers or other things around you? Of course, besides reading my books or Jennifer's books, which I know that's at the top. But
yeah, that's at the top.
Other than that, do you have inspirations?
I do have some deep friendships with some other writers, and discussing writing with them. I just took a workshop with, I don't know if you know him, Tom Jenks, fairly established editor of 20th century writers, and for totally different reasons, not to write thrillers and mysteries, but to understand more the depth of literary deconstruction and thinking about different writing projects. My brother, my oldest, I'm from a family of, my mother had 10 children. I was the youngest, and my oldest brother was a writer, a beautiful writer. He's now passed away. He wrote much more literary pieces and was a English professor and writing instructor. And so I read his, I have some of his pieces that I read. Honestly, my wife, was a English major and a literary major, and she's always threatened to write a novel, and I'm the one writing the novels, and never had that sort of inspiration from an early age, like she always has had. So life can be funny that way.
Do you let her read your stuff before it goes to a publisher or an editor, or is that too
Absolutely tough? No. She's got a good ear. She's a voracious reader. And especially on the female character, she really helps me not think through, but gives me good feedback on the characters. So that's great. And oftentimes about the plot or the pacing. She can be a little too soft sometimes. I find, I write something. Oh, that's great. I go back and really, I'm not so sure that's great. So
Yeah. She's probably rolling around.
Right.
Good job, honey.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Don't worry,
nice.
I'll keep working. Don't worry.
Right.
So what's next?
I want to finish Rendezvous. I'm about 65,000 words into it. It's probably going to be around the 80,000 word when I'm finished. So if I squint, I can kind of see the finish line from where I am, though I have a high wire act to pull off and pulling a lot of threads together for the plot. And then after that, I have this moving away from the thriller category, for stepping away from it for a bit. This larger coming of age story that I've been thinking about for some time with these group of young boys. That was really one of the motivations for taking the writer's workshop, to kind of help think in a different way on a project like that versus what I've been writing. So I'm looking forward to that, at least now, since I don't have to work on it and it hasn't become work yet. It seems exciting. I'm sure at some point along the line when I do start, I will say to myself, why did I do this?
Yeah.
I miss Nick.
Yeah, I might miss Nick. Nick would need a rest as well as I think I might need a rest too. So that'll be okay.
So listen, do you like to have interaction with readers, social media? Do you have a website? How do people find Mark?
Yeah, I do have a website. It's markpawlosky.com. I'm on Twitter, now X. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm going to be doing a reading of Blackbird at an event on July 11th. I'm in Kansas City, and there's a bookstore here called Rainy Day Books, and only moved here 2 years ago after living 30 years in Seattle area in the Pacific Northwest. It turns out Rainy Day Books is nationally, if not internationally, known and recognized bookstore. It gets authors from all over the world to come in and do events. These two, husband and wife, founded it 40 plus years ago and have built this incredible platform for writers. And I'll be doing a reading in July, which I'm looking forward to. I've done a couple other bookstore events, so I get to meet people, and
We'll put all of that up on our website, with your website and everything, so people can find you real easy. Now, the book is called Blackbird. It's a Nick Byron investigation. Mark Pawlosky, thank you for being here.
thank you so much for having me. It's been a treat.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.